sometimes our great artists have been the most critical of our society, it is because their sensitivity and their concern for justice, which must motivate any true artist, makes him aware that our nation falls short of its highest potential. I see little of more importance to the future of our country and our civilization than full recognition of the place of the artist.
But the artist is almost never fully recognized in today's society. Instead, our world praises non-stop work and efficiency at all costs. Nowhere is this modern lifestyle more evident than the world's urban centers and big cities, home to over 50% of Earth's population. The result is that we end up ignoring the beautiful world around us. And that includes our own cities and all of the marvels of human ingenuity and creativity that can be found within them. Artists, however, seek to remind us of the wonder of life. They seek to push society to evolve and improve. And graffiti and street artists view a city not as a tool to facilitate their work, but rather as a canvas on which to create. One of the hubs of this ever-evolving artistic movement is Atlanta, Georgia, a center not only for the creation of public art, but also for the fight over the future of street art. Although graffiti was present as early as the early 20th century, including James Kilroy's famous markings on U.S. ships during World War II, it was not until the 1970s and 80s that graffiti became increasingly visible in cities like Los Angeles and New York.
I'm John Morse, and I'm a visual artist. When I lived in New York City, I moved there in 1982. The street art scene was very much alive. I was friends with Keith Haring, and I knew Kenny Sharp, and just, Stash, Crash, all these mainstream, not mainstream, but at the time they were very edgy, street artists. And there was just countless, tens of thousands of graffiti artists.
Those graffiti artists were known as taggers, and they painted their pseudonyms across cities to gain recognition and notoriety. Taggers' art slowly expanded from simple signatures to complex and large-scale works. During the 1980s, a market opened up for graffiti as an art form, including multiple galleries across the US. And around this time, many prominent artists like Morse began employing new media and establishing their own unique styles.
So my thought was, at the time, I wanted to also do street art, but I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. So I purposely avoided anything that was paint. And I began by, my very first street piece was a poster that had to do with the disaster of AIDS.
Complex themes like that could also be seen in the work of countless public artists. And starting in the late 20th century, cities began commissioning street art.
In Atlanta, the modern public art program really started in like 1977 when Mayor Maynard Jackson started a percent for art ordinance so that there could be funding for new public art.
Programs like that marked a major milestone in the movement's journey from illegal to impactful. Since then, public art has exploded across Atlanta, from Buckhead to the Beltline. Support for public art is on the rise in the U.S. Atlanta has become one of the best U.S. cities for public art, and Atlantans see it as a vital part of the city's culture. John Morse, who moved to Atlanta after working in New York for a number of years, recognizes the strength of the arts here.
In particular with Atlanta, if I may say, Atlanta is got something going on. There's something happening in Atlanta, and that energy is quite good. And so the standard is, there's a bar here. You're not simply in a circle. It's people are watching.
It's pretty significant because Atlanta's become, nationally and internationally recognized as a street art friendly city.
The thriving public art scene in Atlanta is due in large part to the organization Living Walls, founded by Monica Campana. It's a group that brings together artists and street art fans from across the world to create murals during its annual conference.
My name is Monica Campana, and I am the Executive Director for Living Walls, The City Speaks. We focus on creating thought-provoking public art that inspires social change and activates public spaces. We have been doing this kind of work for about 7 years now, and we have about over 150 murals in the city of Atlanta.
The city of Atlanta is also a major supporter of the public arts, including its own festival called Elevate.
During the Elevate Arts Festival, we have a lot of street art that's part of the festival that happens, and it becomes permanent here in the city. So over the years, we've funded and sponsored a lot of public art.
The city sponsors a host of art initiatives, including one called the Mural Bike Rack Project, that encourages the use of bicycles around the city. Programs like these have made Atlanta a street art capital, and the city's influence has spread far beyond its limits.
A lot of municipalities have been calling us and asking us how we came up with the idea and how we set it up so that they could emulate it across the country.
Some of the best areas for murals in the city include Croc Street Tunnel, the Beltline, Old Fourth Ward, and Inman Park. But the modern public art movement is by no means limited to murals. Artists like Morse enjoy branching off into varied and often unexpected media.
And the next piece I did was a birthday card to the city of New York for the Brooklyn Bridge. And what it was an edition of 25 birthday cards that were handmade by me, and each was signed and numbered. But I put 24 of these out on the street in not hidden places, but places that would be away from the weather, but that you could see it if you actually looked in that spot. And the idea was to create a very public piece that was also very personal. The piece was open to any person in the public realm, but only one person would ever get it.
Even a birthday card can be turned into public art with the right amount of creativity. That birthday card was not the only time Morse ventured out of the traditional realm of public art. He often utilizes unusual forms of art, and his favorite is poetry.
Well, poetry is a very powerful method to communicate. And so my burden on me was I needed to write the absolute best poem possible. And once I felt that I was confident with the poem, then I wanted to share that with people.
But actually getting people to read his poetry and understand the message would be difficult, so Morse had to get creative. One of his more recent projects, called Roadside Haiku, overcame that challenge in order to offer a scathing critique of urban consumer culture.
Here in Atlanta, I used what's known as bandit signs, those signs that you see all over at street sides that say things like, we'll paint your house or earn money at home and that sort of thing. And I used them to write poetry, haiku, that talked about the urban condition. So people are driving their car, they stop at a stoplight, they basically are there for 17 seconds, they look to their left and they see these blaring letters that say, yard sale on Saturday. And then they see there's another line and it says, we need to sell our old stuff. And then that last line, so we can buy more. Then the light changes and they leave. And whether they knew it or not, they read your poem. So I made 500 of these. I wrote 10 different poems. I did 50 of each one, signed them and numbered them, and put them all over Atlanta.
This project shows how public art in any form can be used to deliver a powerful message and have a profound impact on the way people think.
One of the poems that I put here in Atlanta on one of those signs, it said, build personal wealth in the comfort of your home. Read to your children. And people want to be wealthy and they want to be able to do it in their own home. And the thing that they can do is accessible to everybody. Read to your child and you're going to be very, very, a very, very wealthy family in personal wealth.
Messages like that one make the modern street art movement so important in our materialistic modern world. Unfortunately, the prospering of public art in Atlanta and around the country has caused controversy around the movement.
This week marks the start of a trial in Brooklyn that's been in the works since 2013. It stems from a dispute over the beloved Queens structure called 5 Points. For decades, it was covered in graffiti. It had become a destination for art lovers. But then the owner whitewashed the walls and tore it down.
Neighborhood waking up after Halloween vandalized, and now they want it
Is it art? Well, it is actually, and taxpayers have paid for it.
Despite the outstanding success of public artists around the country, the movement is not without its critics. In the 5 Points case, artists whose work was destroyed by property owners decided to sue the landowner and won over $6 million. 5 Points is just one example of the type of case that is determining the future of public art in the United States. Atlanta has seen its own fair share of disputes, with the most recent occurring just last year, in 2017.
Well, it's the battle of the artists against City Hall.
Yeah, a group of Atlanta artists suing the city in a fight to display their work without having to jump through hoops.
The charge against Atlanta's unfair policies was led by artist Fabian Williams, also known as Occasional Superstar. Williams has created a number of monumental pieces in Atlanta, revering civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and James Baldwin.
The city government's place to tell me what to put up on a wall, especially if I've cleared it with the business owner.
The city had a certification process for public art, and the certification process was for artwork that was both on public right-of-way and private spaces that are publicly viewable.
The ordinance in question dates back to 1982. The law required a time-consuming approval process, which the artists claimed was an unconstitutional violation of free speech rights because it hindered artists' freedom and required government oversight over their creative expression. Only a month after the lawsuit was filed, the artists reached a settlement with Atlanta.
And as a result, the city is no longer enforcing the certification of public art. So it's really quite a bit easier now for artists currently to put public artwork in public spaces.
The fight over public art is also about the content of artwork, which often involves controversial topics relating to social issues and politics. And since Living Wall's own mission statement involves creating thought-provoking art that inspires social change, it was bound to be involved in political discussions.
In the past 2 years, we have been seeing that our political environment has been promoting a lot of divisiveness and hate towards our immigrant communities in this country. And we thought that it was the right time for us to use our platform to give and hand the mic to immigrant voices that don't often get to tell their own story.
And so Living Walls has set out to be as inclusive as possible and raise awareness of the difficulties faced by immigrants in the US. And when people disagree, it allows the artists to realize that what they're doing actually is impactful, because it's moving the public to discuss sensitive issues that are well known but not often discussed.
Because what you're looking to do is to share a message that even if people already know it, and quite often they do, just so that they have a different angle on it, or that gives them pause so that they will believe, I see this thing in a different way. Anytime that you do anything in the public realm, you are in a mix that is a challenge. I don't care if you have permission or if you don't have permission. Essentially, your challenges range from it's an illegal act, so you risk arrest, all the way over to you're putting yourself out there, and that's a risk. And the artist always takes this risk, and in particular public art, because when you create public art, you're allowing yourself to be judged by everybody. You're saying, look at my stuff. Now what do you think?
And Morse has run into challenges on both ends of that spectrum, both legal and philosophical. But what he has learned from his experience is that the controversy surrounding public art is not only good for inspiring debate, but it can also directly benefit the artist himself. And that's exactly what happened with Roadside Haiku, which turned out to be the most successful project of his career.
What amazed me when I did the haiku project here on those bandit signs was the visceral response. I had no intention of anything happening, but when the head of the Keep Atlanta Beautiful committee threatened me with fines of $500 per day per sign, which, if you do the math, was basically $250,000 per day in fines. But because of that challenge, and because she made some publicity out of it, it caused people to take notice.
His project was featured on countless national news outlets, including The New Yorker, The Guardian, and NPR. And after only 3 days, art collectors had taken down every single one of the signs.
Because of that controversy, because of the complaint, that's what made it so popular.
In the next years, that publicity paid off even more.
After the Atlanta experience, and it made the press, I got a call from the Department of Transportation in the city of New York, and they asked me to come up to New York to meet with them. I met with the commissioner of the department, and she said, I want you to do a haiku project for the city of New York.
For this traffic safety project, which Morse called Curbside Haiku, he wrote 12 poems, leading to even more media coverage in the New York Times, New York Post, and BBC.
And in each one of these media instances, you had my poetry either read aloud or printed out. So essentially, the week that the project launched in New York City, it's possible that millions of people around the world read my poetry.
For his work, Morse received the Brendan Gill Prize, an annual award founded by Jacqueline Kennedy that honors the artist who best captures the spirit of New York City.
I went from a project here in Atlanta that I was accused of doing something illegal to being honored and awarded for it in New York City. So I think that the important lesson for me, and I think for anybody, is pursue your art to the best of your ability and follow what you think is the right thing to do. because there will always be naysayers.
In reality, public art should be controversial. The CEO of Sproul Arts, Bob Kinsey, agrees that cities should be able to overcome the discomfort that art can bring.
And I think generally art should inspire or at least make somebody think. If it's just so homogenized and vanilla that no one even pays attention to it, I think that there's no purpose. And so Atlanta seems to have gotten pretty good at handling controversial art, whether it's political statements or the way the graphics are, or the medium.
So the art's always been sort of like the excuse that we will give the public to come and look at not just the beautiful art that we put on a wall, but also what was going on around that space, and in a way allowing for people to create new dialogues and humanize maybe spaces that many times were neglected or not seen.
Not only can public art open up public areas, it has the potential to bring joy to artists and citygoers alike.
It just so happens there's this beautiful result. You are doing art because it's fulfilling you personally. But it just so happens it brings joy to other people. And that is the world's greatest reward. It's amazing.
Public art has such noble and large-scale goals, it's sad that it's so controversial. But provoking uncomfortable dialogue and drawing attention to run-down, neglected parts of cities are the missions of the movement, and the artists understand they're part of something bigger than themselves.
I feel like there's a sense of awareness that doesn't come with a lot of street art that's being made, and that it's been really incredible on like a personal level for me to see the work that I make at like such a small level be like on this monumental scale.
Public art can help cities with more than just aesthetics and conversation, however.
It encourages tourism, the communities like the street art for the most part, and it creates a colorful tapestry that's kind of changing the way that the urban center looks like.
Bob Kinsey credits Atlanta's public art and modern culture with drawing major companies like State Farm and Mercedes-Benz to headquarter themselves here, creating thousands of jobs and bringing in new revenue for the city and state.
Companies like that are looking for great places to move to and invest in. And I think that it certainly played a role with those companies that, wow, this is a place that would be a good place for our employees to be.
Public art can also have incredible power to change communities for the better, demonstrated by its role in the transformation of areas like the Beltline into cultural hubs of the city.
The street art community, it was surprising the feeling of impact on neighborhoods, specifically neighborhoods that, neighbors are coming out and thanking you just for having an artist paint a wall.
One of the areas that Living Walls has been working to enhance in the city is the multicultural Buford Highway.
Buford Highway is a very diverse and complex area. When you think of the immigrant community that lives in this country, there's a lot of people here that should be celebrated more often and should be more visible, because the work that they do here and the work that they put to come to this country should be celebrated and not put aside, especially in Buford Highway, which is only 15 minutes away from downtown Atlanta. I think that with the privilege that we have sitting here, being the ones creating these kind of projects, we have a lot of responsibility and should be accountable for making those voices heard.
Is the goal for public artwork and street art is to increase the quality of life in Atlanta It encourages people to interact with the outdoors and each other in a different way than they had prior to it being prevalent.
And so the movement has the power to change not only how the world views art, but also how we view and treat each other.
I think that this is the beginning of, hopefully continuing the story and inspiring others, and maybe when we all go off and doing different projects, the same level of dedication and respect can continue.
So even when people are, you think they're attacking you, be careful, because that person who's thinking that they're being your enemy, they're actually your helper, they're your friend, and you can build off of that.
We can all be courteous while still being forward-looking and ambitious, whether while creating art or in our daily lives. And the lessons we can learn from the success of public art in Atlanta can be applied to questions of how we can improve people's lives across the world. And that was exactly the result of those Brooklyn Bridge birthday cards that Morse made back in 1986.
Oddly enough, about 5 years ago, my studio website got a note from this woman saying, one day my daughters and I were out in New York City in 1986, and we found this birthday card, and there was photos that she had sent along with the email, and she said, "Are you this John Morse?" So it was just amazing, the resonance. And she had told me in this email, my daughters and I were spending a day in New York. She said, always a day in New York was wonderful, but she said, this thing fascinated us. Who was this guy? Why did he do it? And this, to me, is the essence of street art, to engage the public.
At its core, art is there to remind us of the beauty of life, of the beauty of our cities, and of the beauty of the human species in all its glory as simultaneously unified and diverse. And it starts with respect for artists and an understanding of public art's purpose.
People have to accept that art is there to enhance the city, to make visitors impressed with the city, to make everyday life for the residents who see these pieces of public art and different displays, to enrich their lives and make them feel like they're in an important area that's doing great things.
Art is to nourish the roots of our culture. Society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes them. We must never forget that art is not a form of propaganda, it is a form of truth. Artists are not engineers of the soul. It may be different elsewhere, but democratic society, in it, the highest duty of the writer, the composer, the artist, is to remain true to himself and to let the chips fall where they may. In serving his vision of the truth, the artist best serves his nation.
It's so funny. Okay.